Black cisgender heterosexual identified men are killing Black trans women. Black ones.
We are not talking about it in the church.
Those street guys are already engineers. If they're mixing drugs and stuff together, they're chemical engineers.
If you're just like, yeah, let's kill 50 cops just because, you know, that's only a fraction of the Black people that they killed. Wait, now you're talking about my wife.
For those of you who are joining in, we are talking about just the housing in the Black community and owning property, why it's important, and how to get yourself in there.
When I think of financial literacy, I just don't think of the classroom work. I think some of it is practical application.
I'm scared, especially, you know, calling them to arms, talking about poll workers or poll watchers. That is rooted in history of voter suppression and intimidation.
Joe Biden needs to make that a part of his educational platform.
Call that shit out.
I don't see much value in you speaking in tongues, and yet when you speak in English, you don't say nothing for my people.
Many of the reasons why we're dying is because of the conditions we live under that cause our health to be so bad, and that cause it's the food, it's the water, it's clean that shit up first.
When their fathers had prostate cancer, I had like a 150% chance of getting cancer, being diagnosed with cancer. I had a friend that did a raw vegan diet, 20 years remission, had thyroid cancer, never had surgery. I'm like, that's what I'm doing.
This week in Black People Shit, Health is Wealth. I'm your host, Chrystee Pharris. In a 2017 article in Scientific America, Isabel Mansu, the professor of neuroepigenetics at the University of Zurich, whose research primarily focuses on traumatic experiences and its effect on the DNA, said that the effects of trauma, which can be transmitted to the offspring, can be reversed by a positive experience. So now that we are confronted with both a pandemic and fighting for social change, how does the consequences of being Black in America affect our health? And what are we doing to combat it? I'm here today with actress Janora McDuffie. Let me add my girl in.
Hey, everybody.
Actor and founder of Confidant International, Cory Tyler.
What's good?
Yay. And writer Abdul Majid. All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having the time to come in and weigh on these topics. We want to say a special thank you to Cory Tyler, actor, who, of course, we all remember him from A Different World, one of my favorite TV shows from, back in those time periods.
Way back when.
Yeah. I always wanted to be on that show, so that was my favorite.
Well, I think now would be the perfect time to bring A Different World back.
Right?
Reboot.
Yeah.
Relevant.
They need to
I
do
can
a
be
reboot.
somebody's mama.
That's funny.
I guess that means we can't be
You can be the new Freddie's mama.
There you go.
I got the hair.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. All right, so let's get started. So in a recent Post article, it shows that there have been a spike in depression and anxiety amongst African Americans since the George Floyd killing. What do you think has been the emotional ramifications of the last few months? And have they stirred up any old feelings or anxieties from the past for you? Go ahead, Cory.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to be on your show. It's an honor to connect with people that remember A Different World, because I know we've had generations after that.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to see a reboot. And just to kind of tie, the time that I was on A Different World and to your question, it was so interesting because I was talking to a friend of mine, and I remember doing an episode about AIDS at the time with Tisha Campbell and Whoopi Goldberg they were guest starring on the show. And the show for that time really took on some heavy topics that were affecting the planet. And I have such respect when I look back at those shows because they were really pushing the edge, commentary and talking about things that meant a lot. And racism was, of course, something that was talked about often on that show. And so when we talk about how people are doing right now, particularly Black people, and I heard that statistic that we're not doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a lot to do with our mental capacity, our ability in terms of how are we doing inside.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting because I was talking to an older gentleman who kind of prided himself on the fact, he says, you know, I'm X amount years old, Cory, and I've never seen a psychiatrist. And it was sort of like a status symbol for him. The thing is, it wasn't that he didn't need a psychiatrist. It was the fact that he had chosen to use that as a moment to feel better about himself. And I get that. But in the Black community, we need to be talking to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Having a confidant, and that's exactly what I do. You know, I transitioned out of being an actor to working in the wellness industry. And now I have clients that call me and they open up to me and they express their emotions and their feelings and their anger and their sadness and their devastation.
Right.
And that all of that is so encouraged right now. So I just invite every person, particularly Black men, that if you don't have somebody that you're talking to, I highly recommend it. Now, there's a difference between finding somebody that you're just going to commiserate with,
mm-hmm.
and finding somebody who's going to see the best in you, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to empathize with you, that's going to understand where you're from, where
Right.
you're coming from, and what you're feeling. So that to me is the distinction. And when we're talking about mental health, it's just essential that everybody have somebody to talk to with whom they feel like I can be myself and I can lay it on the table and I'm not going to be judged. So that's the first.
Yeah, it's interesting because I posted on my Facebook and my Instagram, you know, how everybody was doing because they watched a murder. They watched 3 murders on TV, like, and repeatedly over and over, and it's real.
Yeah.
So I asked people how they were doing, and I have like over 150 responses between the two. You know, people were like, I'm not doing great. I'm not doing well. Janora?
Yeah. Cory, we can have a session right now. You ready? I think also, in addition to the constant coming to grips with, it's not a movie we're watching, it's real life.
Right.
And these people look like us. That coming on the tail of this COVID pandemic, where we are just coming out of a space of, or shucks, maybe still stuck in the space of anxiety or feeling lonely or feeling disconnected or fear, however it presents itself. So then that happens. And then here we are faced with the reminder that we are still Black in America.
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, what has given hope is that the world has joined us. But I do think it's this extra layer of hurt because it's us. And maybe it's us coming from a space of finally being able to go day to day with this double consciousness that we have to as Black folks.
Right.
But here it is, it's just like in the face, and I'm sad and I'm mad and I cry. And this is all in the span of 5 minutes now too.
Right.
And Cory, I think you really had a great point when you said being wary or very specific about the person you talk to, because you can easily get in this fest of one-upping each other of why shit is so bad for Black folks right now.
Mm-hmm. You know, for me, I had a conversation with somebody because I literally told them what happened 20 years ago, what they said to me that hurt me, that had to do with race. And I realized a lot of stuff started to come up, like, because we've had and we've learned how to suppress every single thing. Because you're Black, you learn how to suppress when somebody does something crazy, when somebody says something, you know, you're so pretty to be Black, or little things like that. You learn how to suppress it. And now all of a sudden things started to come up and I was like, why am I feeling so crazy? And I happened to speak to my girlfriend's mother, who's 90, who said that her mother started having nightmares because all of these old things started to come up that happened to her when she was younger. Mm-hmm. And I realized that was happening for me. And I don't know if you guys caught that whole thing that happened on ABC where somebody at ABC was talking very negative about the people that were working there that were people of color. And Sunny happened to be one of them. And what it started to bring up stuff, and what it brought up to me is that I've been lying to people I've been lying to when I go and speak to kids that are students that want to be actors. And there's some truth to what I said to them, but there's also a place of me lying about why my career kind of stopped for a second. And that trauma came up again. And what happened was CBS, I had this audition. They called me in the same day, which most people will know. You get called at least the night before or a couple of days before. I get called in the same day, 2 hours before the audition, 2.5 hours. And I told my agent, like, are you sure? Because, I haven't had a chance to look at the material. No, they love you. They love you. So I'm like, all right, because I'm that black girl that they always bring in. Not realizing that maybe I was just their token this whole entire time, but I'm thinking I got a chance because I'm going in all the time, CBS all the time. Well, I learned later, Bruce, who was the casting director, and Fern, who was head of the diversity program, that when I went into this audition, they had to fight to get me in the room because the director did not want to see anybody of color. And I was the only one that they would see. And everybody was in there for 20 minutes because he was doing a director's work session. And a director's work session is where they're supposed to work with you. This guy had me in there for 3 minutes and I was humiliated. And I remember watching the casting director and the producers put their head down because at first they were like, oh, that was great. That was great. And he was like, thank you. And as soon as I was done, he was like, thank you. And he dismissed me. And I remember walking out feeling so bad. And I remember calling my agent and cussing them out. And then the next week, the same thing happened again. And I told my agent, I said, please call them and ask them if they're going to go black. Because it was a lead character and they had a family. And we all know in the community, as you guys know, if it's a lead, there is no way they're going to have a whole entire family be black for a lead.
Right.
And sure enough, they called and said, yeah, off the record, they're not going black.
Yeah.
And I boo-hooed. And those feelings are starting to come up again. And if I really be honest, and I'm done with my story, but if I really be honest, it traumatized me. And I hate going to auditions to this day. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, hopefully in this new space where people not of color and who might be the gatekeepers or of these spaces that have held back before, they're feeling the guilt. Or not even feeling the guilt, they're now understanding the responsibility. So I am keeping hope that there will be a change in that, and that more people of color will be able to be in those positions to truly fight for the different world 2.0.
Yeah.
Abdul, how are you feeling as our Black male guest host? How are you processing things?
I've been speaking to a lot of Black male friends of mine over the last week or so. And I think majority of them are numb, and not just a incident. I think I heard Killer Mike recently referred to a lot of the killings that have been happening, police killings, as murder porn. Like it's just it's like watching pornography, but and all the guys that I knew, including me, growing up. And mind you, I grew up in the suburbs. My family's from Brooklyn, so I spent a lot of time in Brooklyn. I spent a lot of times in the suburbs. And on both sides, my friends from the suburbs and my friends from the inner city, we have all either known somebody who's been murdered, have seen a murder, have seen a dead body, have seen somebody getting shot. And I think over the years, you sort of get numb from it. Like I was talking to a friend of mine and I was telling her that like, I'm sort of numb to a lot of this stuff. And I don't know if it's because I don't think it's just because of this particular incident. I think it's because of the fact of years and years of just watching this stuff goes on, not just by the police, because I'm not going to castigate all the police as one thing, but by the police and by just living in inner city life or living a Black life. I have friends who die from motorcycle accidents and car accidents. I'm talking like from my freshman year of high school up until today, I think I know at least one Black male who has died.
Wow.
And after a while, you sort of numb to it. And on the therapy side of it, I grew up in a house. My stepmother was a psychiatrist. So I grew up in a house where there was people you can speak to and people can have those conversations with. My father is such an open person with regards to being able to have a Black man to speak to about these things. But as a Black man in the society, you feel like you're not heard. You feel like no one even cares. So why even say anything?
Right.
And a lot of my friends have those exact same feeling. They'll say stuff like, the game is the game, or it is what it is, or, we'll say some slogan just to pass it off, and then we'll start joking with one another about something else, and it'll be just in the past.
Right. Yeah, I feel you, Abdul. And it's like, where do I take the rage? So there was something I posted on social media last week from someone named Deva Del Porto, and I just want to read it real quick, because for me, it just nailed how I was feeling. It goes like this. How are you doing? I'm fine. And then terrible. And then crying. And then laughing. And then screaming. And then grateful. And then over it. And then determined. Then terrified. And then anxious. And then happy. And then exhausted. All in the same minute.
That's deep.
Yeah.
That's
you ever heard of the Kubler-Ross model?
No.
Where it's the Kubler model of how to get over something like denial, anger, depression, something acceptance, right? I think for most of the Black people I know, we're either in denial or anger. We never get to the depression part, and we never get to the acceptance part. We're just always stuck in denial or anger because it happens over and over again. It's like you can never get past something because you got to start back at one because something else traumatic happens in your community. And then let's not even talk about the Black women. Like for the life of me, reading these statistics of what happened to Black women in community. I remember I read an article a couple years ago about in DC, like there were 13 missing Black women in the span of, I don't know, like a couple of months, and no one even spoke about it. Yeah. And then the trauma through rape and the trauma through all the horrific things, just beyond just living a Black existence, beyond that, just beyond the racism, beyond the stuff that you have to deal with. I'm not sure how we can cope properly.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody. There was a little bit of an issue that was happening on the feed, so I just wanted to make sure that was okay. So Tim says PDST is real, and the same effort and resources directed towards veterans should be offered to families experiencing violence and death in the inner city, and that is real. That is really real. Let me ask you guys something else. So there's a book that Henry James wrote that's called The Portrait of a Lady, and he says the famous quote, which is, "You're not only dried up my tears, you've not only dried up my tears, you've dried up my soul." So if America is our Lady Liberty, how do Black people spiritually rehydrate our souls after 400 years of oppression? Anybody want to jump on that one? Go ahead.
Self-love, number one. Cultivating a relationship with ourselves and getting out of the idea of objectifying our life as being consumers, merely consumers here on the cog of the American system as we know it, and just waking up and redefining. Like, for example, I go back to Black Panther when I saw it with my boys. And for me, what was beautiful about it is my sons are 10 and 7. And here they are seeing a protagonist in an African country that's like the most technologically advanced society. They're seeing that from 10 and 7. When I was growing up, I was seeing a white Superman and a white Batman. So I'm so encouraged by the younger generation that they're seeing something different. And at the same time, when it gets to my generation and older generation, it's like, there's so much trauma, there's so much anger, there's so much rage, there's so much of this stuff that I feel is like ancestral and energetic, that even our ancestors, I can feel the pain of my ancestors oftentimes when I see another senseless death. It requires me to really get comfortable with doing what I call my rage work, which is identifying the rage and the anger first and foremost, and knowing that there's a place, a healthy place that I can take that angst. Otherwise, I either suppress it and I erupt, or I explode within. And it's a very dangerous place if I'm not able to love myself and find a healthy avenue to get it out and express.
It reminds me of something like Jackie Robinson. You know, a lot of people say that he died because of having to suppress every single thing that he went through when he was, out there on the field and having to deal with all that racism. I think a little bit of that is happening to us, and we have to learn how to get that stuff out and talk about it. And hopefully we get to a place that we can call people out like we have been doing of their racism right on the spot. Doesn't have to be in anger. Doesn't have to be, some crazy thing that we have to do. I just feel like we need to speak up now and get it out. Otherwise, I think that's part of the other reason why we are dying so young and why we have so many health issues. It's because we're not allowed to say the things that we need to say. So
I do think you're right, Chrystee, that we are approaching this new space that we can say what's on our minds and what's on our hearts. I think for me, what continues to keep me in this twirling space of all those emotions in the same minute that you talked about, Cory, are the outside influences like the news, like social media. That's right. I'll turn off the news and then I'll go in my feed and then it just riles me up again. And I feel like if I'm not getting mad, then I'm part of the problem. And then like, where am I in the fight in terms of solution? And then, images that make me just very sad. And Abdul, I would disagree with you in the part of not getting to the depression, because I do think that is something real within our community and something I have even fought, and I feel it coming. I feel when it comes. And so I just try, Cory, I think you had great advice when it came to finding a way to love yourself in this. And I think, Chrystee, that's a really provocative question. Where does the spirituality component fit in this? Because my initial thoughts to your question is relating spirituality to religion, and then thinking about 400 years and white folks using religion to keep us down or to keep us enslaved or wait, or them as the master, all the bullshit that happened within certain facts of religion that have not been helpful for the forward movement of Black folks. So how do I place that? And then how do I place my anger and realize that people are my brother and my sister from a greater standpoint of spirituality, but at the same time, you just killed somebody on TV. So I'm everywhere. So I appreciate having this conversation again, because I'm everywhere at all times.
And it's funny too, because for me, and I'll let you jump in, Abdul, I have found myself going back to my Christian ways and listening to my pastor more often now, because I needed that in order to get through this whole the pandemic and now this. And what I do love about Kenneth Omer, he actually spoke up about the white pastors and leaders who were not stepping up for the Black Lives Matter, and so that made it even more special for me, that I was like, oh, he's calling folks out. So that's how I've been getting through. How about you, Abdul?
I think Black people need some form of redress of an acknowledgement of the things that happened to them. I think as a Muslim person myself, the religion I believe in is Islam, and part of Islam you believe in, but the other part of Islam you believe in justice. I think those two things go hand in hand. Sometimes you need the justice to spiritually uplift yourself from a difficult place to be in. Sometimes I think the acknowledgement of what happened to you, and then the redress of those things that happened, I think it's way heavier on your soul. And I think that unless we get that redress, unless we or acknowledge the pain that we have, and I'm talking a real acknowledgement. I don't believe in all of this watching actors on TV saying I'm sorry to you. That doesn't mean anything to me. That's not justice. Yeah. The justice that I'm looking for is beyond your words. I need more than that. And I think from a spiritual standpoint, I don't think I can disconnect the two. I don't think I can disconnect the spiritual part of it or the forgiveness part of it if I don't get that justice that I'm looking for.
Yeah. Oh, so making sure. Yeah. Cory, I feel so like, I'm like, God, I want you to stay on. What's happening here? Tell us just a little bit more about what your business is about and how you're helping people so that more people can get a little bit more information. And I do have your website, which is www.corytyler.com. So just give a little bit more about what you're offering and what you guys do.
Yeah. So what I do for a living is I listen to people, and I've been doing that for the last 15, 20 years as a licensed counselor. And I found that has been very helpful, particularly in times like this, where people do not feel heard. Mm-hmm. They do not feel listened to. They do not feel, or if they do, they don't feel like it's a safe space for them to be their authentic selves. And what I've realized is that we often wear masks in society, layers of masks. We have a mask for our family. We have a mask at our job. We have a mask for friends. We have a mask for, white people. And after a while, they can just become stuck with all this composite of masks that we don't even know who we are underneath. Mm-hmm. So I created a company called Confidant International. And the idea is connecting clients with professional listeners like myself, mediators, and certified conflict resolution specialists who help us identify the masks and help us peel the layers to where we can extend ourselves from an empathic place, from a compassionate place. And one of the things that I'm really, really excited about, and I partnered up with, there's a course that's starting June 24th called the Compassion Course. And your listeners and watchers can go to compassioncourse.org. And it's literally a 2-week course that I've taken 5 years in a row that advocates for how to speak compassionately to ourselves and to others, because it's learned behavior. It's something that they take a year to do because it's not something that we easily by default have access to. So it's a beautiful thing. I recommend everyone check it out if you can, and go to my website, CoryTyler.com, and you can find out something that I'm starting called the Compassion Club, where alongside that compassion course, we practice and role play empathy and compassionate exercises. It's a really healing experience, and it's something that I love to do, and I loved acting, but I gotta be honest with you, I love this even more because there is an immediate satisfaction with seeing somebody who feels heard. Who hasn't felt heard in a long time. So that's my
I love it. I love it. That's so wonderful, and it's so needed. And I just hope that our people in the community take advantage of something like this, because we don't. We think it's corny, we think this, but let me tell you something. Getting counseling and all that good stuff is amazing. Yeah. It makes you feel so good when you are being hurt. Did you want to say something before?
I did. One, at first I thought you said compassion chorus, so I got a little nervous because I thought it was something doing with singing, and I felt like I needed it, but y'all might not accept me. So it's compassion chorus, and I think that's what's needed. And I think you're awesome, Cory, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, Cory, we just want to thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. We're definitely going to have you back, just because I feel like you have a lot of knowledge that you're dropping. And thank you for sharing your website. And I really hope that everybody gets a chance to check it out. So make sure that you check it out, which is CoryTyler.com. All right. We're going to bring in. Thank you.
Take care, family.
All right. So we have another guest that is coming on, Kimberly Joy, who is an author. And she is also a health coach. Hi, Kimberly.
Hello.
Come on in. Excellent. Excellent. We want to make sure that you get drop some knowledge on this health side of things as well. Mm-hmm. I want to bring this in right there. So let me just get to the next part of our questions that we have. So, and then we'll jump into some of the stuff that you do. But it's been well documented that physical effects that stress can have on the body, right? Physical can affect the body. But when compounded by the effects of COVID-19 and disproportionately, or it has disproportionately has had on the Black community, how do we go about defending our health when we're being attacked on all sides?
Well, it starts with your gut. I tell people I studied extensively the microbiome, and people are going to say, okay, she's getting real scientific, but that's literally your gut health. We talk about probiotics, you hear prebiotics, but more of your neurotransmitters are created in the brain, in the gut than they are in your brain. So when you think about that, if I am not protecting my gut health, my immune system is housed in my gut. So if your digestive system is out of whack, which a lot of people's digestive systems are, then it triggers all kinds of mental issues in the sense of, can I handle stress properly? It also so we're dealing with massive stress. Now here's the compound issue. Stress weakens the immune system. So when you ask that question, I'm always saying to my clients and people that we have to handle the digestive health. And that comes from the proper type of foods that we need to eat. Also, and that opens up a huge can of worms as well, because we talk about accessibility in a community and what you can actually get. All of those things matter. But to answer your question, the biggest thing we have to do is address gut health. And there are many things we can talk about in that, but to answer your question, that's the biggest part. So it's going to help your brain and it's going to help your immune system. So taking care, radical self-love, and when people say, okay, it's not like you are what you eat, it truly is that. You are exactly what you eat. And so it turns on DNA in your body and it turns off DNA. So when you talk about the neuroepigenetics, that's all housed in the gut. So that food that you're consuming, when you're taking in something, we all know, like you can say, okay, I'm not supposed to eat Doritos and I shouldn't be eating too much sugar and this and that and the other, but what foods will actually express genes properly? And so that's where we talk about, green leafy vegetables, things that we're not always getting, right? Like, so that's that space in our community where, we may have our collards, but we cook them down to the place where we throw some swine in there that is actually horrible to put into your body. I'm going to be talking.
That's the best thing. Listen, you gotta cook them greens all the way down. Now you gotta, at least throw some turkey legs up in there.
But now you have nitrates. Now you are literally killing your gut flora and your bacteria. So we're saying we're trying to protect ourselves and protect our immune system, but yet we're not allowing and feeding our bodies in a way that's nourishing to give us the maximum amount of energy and protection for what's coming. And as we all know, these foods are the things that give us type 2 diabetes, that high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all of those factors. Then when you put a virus that attacks the body on top of that, you don't have the ability to, combat it. And we find ourselves dying disproportionately because of those issues.
So we need to eat right. In the midst of all this coronavirus stuff, we need to make sure that we're not suppressing everything that we are feeling.
Correct.
And, and we got to make sure we get enough rest. Go ahead, Janora.
Yeah. So Kimberly, I hear and I believe everything you're saying. The challenge is when I'm watching the news or I'm on my feed or I'm feeling some kind of way, I don't have it within myself to say, let me find some vegetables. I'm saying, where's my wine at? Or just eating the first thing. Like, how then in that case, in the midst of everything we're going through as a world, how do we make better choices? Because to me, my self-soothing is not anything helpful.
Well, I think that process is back to, in Janora, you and I have a relationship, but I talk about something called primary food in our lives, right? So that boils down to our career, our spirituality, our physical activity, and our relationships. So when those things are out of whack, it causes us to move towards that comfort food that we want because we're not getting enough. We have to retrain ourselves. This is the part where it's the hard work. It's the stuff we don't want to do. It's that process of having to dig in spiritually to certain places, to work on the relationships, to get into that career that you love. And when we're seeing those things and recognize, I see what happens is when I realize I'm grabbing something that I know I shouldn't, I ask myself immediately, what am I running from? What don't I have enough of? How am I not nourishing myself? What's happening? but that's a retraining of the brain. That's not something, that's the life coaching side of what I do with people, where I'm like, you really have to stop thinking about food. We've been trained from the beginning. When something good happens, what does your mom say? Oh, I'm going to give you a treat, right? Like you get the candy. Or when something bad happened and you were feeling sad, oh girl, let's go for some ice cream and let's, so we've trained ourselves to do this. This is not something, but it's also within our DNA. And to be able to turn those things on and off, it comes a lot of times with practice and work. And it's not going to be something, like I said, it's not an easy fix. Janora, I hate to say it. I wish I could say, oh, if you're just going to turn off a switch, but we really have to find ourselves around people. I would say be the dumbest person in the room and be the most unhealthy person in the room. And the reason why I say that is because if you're constantly around people that are elevating themselves mentally and elevating themselves on a physical level, you're going to rise to that occasion. And so we as a community have to find those individuals and connect with them to move forward.
So let me ask you, and I'll let you jump in a second. Let me ask this question. So for instance, I have a friend of mine that just had a minor heart attack, and they were, obviously they know that they have to change their eating, but they really don't know where to start and where to go. So on top of dealing with some emotional stuff that was happening at home, now we got a pandemic. Now we got the social justice stuff that's happening and riots and stuff. On top of that, now you're dealing with a heart attack situation. I think they're at a place where they're going, oh my God, like, I don't know where to start. What do I do? How do I even change these habits? How can you give us like a brief little thing of how do we do that? How do we change this? Where do I go? Where do I find this information?
Okay, well, for me, and I hate to be like almost like a shameless plug, but I'm going to say I wrote a book called Share the Joy, 52 Weeks to Abundant Health that steps people through.
I'm sorry, can I stop you for a second? It should never be a shameless plug. If it's going to help and bless some people, you go on and share that with everybody. I appreciate you saying that, yes. Okay, go ahead.
But I have been on shows before where they don't want that, so I wanted to make sure.
I know, but you know what? Don't have them, don't have you on the show then. You know what I mean?
But
go ahead.
All right,
go
well,
ahead.
I appreciate that, sister.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
So the book that I wrote was really because I felt like in our community, we don't have enough resources to say, where do I start? My fees pretty much start at $125 an hour. So sometimes I have clients that can afford me and other times I don't, right? But I don't want the lack of information to have you say, I can't make this change. So this book literally steps people through. The first month is only about sleep and water. Now you may say, what in the world, why would you write a whole 4 weeks worth of sleep and water? But if you don't get those two things right, I don't care if you're trying to now take the EMFs out of your life and, add black seed oil and all that. If you're not getting enough sleep and you're not getting enough water in your body, you're going to constantly be in a deficit. So the book that I wrote really literally steps people 1 week at a time through all the changes, the dietary changes, things that you can take out from, like we don't even realize how we're disrupting our endocrine system. That's a fancy word for our hormones, right? By using dryer sheets. So we talk about that, like all kinds of things within our bodies that we're doing that's disrupting how we process. And like I said, it comes down to the gut. How is it affecting that part of our body? And the more and more you realize when you have good chi, good fire in your gut, you're going to feel healthier. You're going to have the ability to fight these infections, and you're mentally going to be sharp enough to be able to handle the things that are coming to you.
Okay, so let me just say I'm getting ready to drink my water right now. Abdul, go ahead and jump on in there because we kind of took over. So go ahead and
that's all good. So I know a lot of parents watch this program, and I read an article not too long ago that talks about how social media, the stress from social media, can have a physical effect on children. So from your perspective, how do you combat that, and what are your thoughts on that in terms with regards to, because nowadays, especially now, kids need social media or kids need computers to do homework because of this quarantine and social distancing. And anyway, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm kind of old school. My kids are 14 and 12, and they do not have any social media accounts, period. So I tell them they can text with their friends, they can do whatever they want to do, but that's the space that my husband and I have come to an agreement on for them. And we've said that until you get to college, you won't have one. So that's where we are, because we do know the effects that it has on a child's brain what it does to shaping your position in the world. Who are you? We don't, if like as adults, we have to shut down, like Janora said, she has to shut down social media at times. So I think as parents, if you have opened that door, or called Pandora's box for your kids, I think you need to use monitoring app, the apps that they have for what, not to say that you're looking at everything that they're doing, but can you shut it down? What's their screen time? How much time are they on that? What are they taking in? Making sure you're having adequate discussions with them about what it is that they are seeing. Friend your children. If they're on social media, I know so many parents that are not even friends with their kids, and that's important. Who's talking? What's happening in your comments section? Not to be the police, but to be able to say, can I help you navigate what you're seeing? So I believe that if you have not opened that box, I would suggest keeping it closed and expressing why. And I mean, I have family who's in law enforcement and like governmental law enforcement. And I say that to say that they've even said to my kids, don't do that. It can come back to bite you. We make decisions as 13 and 15-year-olds and, 18-year-olds that sometimes can affect whether I'm getting a job later on. And so I think both of my boys have kind of been almost in a sense scared to say, I don't want that to happen. So I try to say, if you can keep it closed, keep it closed.
So I want to make sure that we get, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just have one quick follow-up question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, because I know specifically in our group, I like to talk to impoverished people, and I know specifically in our group, a lot of people come from single-parent homes. A lot of people. So everything that you've been talking about with nutrition and the social media aspect of it, and being raised in a single-parent home where you have people working 2 or 3 jobs, just what would you be? Just a quick advice to those people who might be watching this.
That are watching it for, give me specific as far as diet is concerned, or everything. Just help me narrow down what you're asking specifically. As
far as everything you just spoke about, diet and the stress on the body that social media can do to children.
For single parents, I mean, it still is the same situation, but involve your kids. I think a lot of times we take on responsibilities. Our kids say we're bored. Well, have you taught your children how to cook? Do the things together. Take them with you if you can in those situations, because I have 2 children that I could say to tonight, mom's not cooking, and they could actually make a meal because I've done that. I think sometimes we decide because it's easier. It's like, oh, I'll just do it myself and this and that and the other. We take as single parents so much on. And I say single parents because anyone who knows me, my history, my husband actually traveled for this is the most I've ever spent time with my husband since the pandemic started, because he's always traveling. So I have kind of lived, while financially I haven't had an issue, I have had an issue with not having him in the home because he's gone for a full week and comes back on the weekends. So my kids had to become helpers in my home, as opposed to it just being, mom doing everything. So I think if you can take that place and say, we've got to work on this together, and as that place, as being a parent, and also not just trying to be their friend, because sometimes in that space when the single parent is trying to like bring in that camaraderie, and you lose that level of saying, I have to give you rules around what this is to protect you. So I don't know if that answered your question thoroughly, but I think that there's that space where we're coming together now. As far as food is concerned, I know sometimes financially that can be very, very difficult. There are many, hacks in some instances that you can do when it comes to making certain types of meals that are crock pot, using more beans, rice, vegetables. I would say frozen vegetables are easier. You can get organic frozen vegetables that are better on the pocketbook, extend longer, do what you have to do, as opposed to the fresh organic. There are just different things that you can do to help that. And I do discuss a little bit of that in that book. I also have other programs that I try to walk people through, just so that, and I do another show called Share the Joy on Facebook and YouTube, where you can get different topics and I talk you through. So that's a great topic to say, I ask people to throw things out. What do you need me to kind of break down and discuss? And I do it in 10 minutes or less, because we don't have time a lot of times to sit in and listen for longer than that.
Okay.
Sounds like
go ahead, Janora.
Mama Kimberly don't play first.
I know. No.
But what I'm curious about, you've got 2 young Black men that you are raising. How have you talked to them about everything that's going on?
I've been very straightforward. I don't hide anything. I don't sugarcoat. I mean, like I said, I have one that's about to be 12 and one that's about to be 14. And, we live in a predominantly white neighborhood. I've had to be extremely vocal with them about what they can and cannot do. I live, in the South. I don't live in California. I live in the South, and in
different ball game over there.
It's a different ball game, and so I've always had to be extremely, I guess, raw with them as to what could meet them. And I don't say it because I want them to be afraid. They have friends of all nationalities. Anybody who looks at my boys knows that they have friends of every creed. I will tell you that, but. I want them to be aware of who they are in this United States of America and how they have to walk through it. And they have seen videos. I haven't sheltered them from that because I know my husband and I have that philosophy that I wanted them to hear it from us. I mean, we had, to give you an example, my son, when we had with our oldest, the talk, I guess, on sex in fifth grade, my third grader said, I think I heard this too soon, but I knew that if the fifth grader knew it, the third grader was going to know it. So I'm not going to leave society to give you the education. So your mom and dad are going to sit down and we're going to talk to you about it, real talk. And we've always left a very open door, and they can ask us anything. And trust me, they have asked us anything. And I'm glad they've asked us questions I would never have asked my parents ever, but it's been good.
Well, I appreciate you dropping some knowledge on us. I want to make sure we get to some of these current events that are happening. I was getting ready to bring Cory back in, but I think he just dropped out. I was like, let me pull him back in. But so Cory, if you're listening, come on in. We'll bring you back. You can talk about some of these current events if you're still there. I'm sure people want to make sure that they're talking about, they get a chance to chat about the fact that we had, I think, up to like 5 people who have been hung, but we can at least talk about the 2 Black men that were hung in California, Palmdale and Victorville, which are about 50 miles apart. And we also had another brother that was hung in New York City. So
the Bronx.
I'm sorry, yeah, in the Bronx. So now they're saying that it's suicide. There's also another guy that was hung. He was Mexican that was hung in Houston. So I don't think it's suicide, but they do a thorough investigation. Any thoughts on that?
I remember a couple of years ago. I remember a couple of years ago where, as a joke, some little girl got hanged by a tree, and they're saying it was a joke, and these white boys tried to say it was a joke, and the girl got away with it. There was this rope mark on her neck, and then I remember the whole incident that happened maybe 20 or so years ago in Texas, where they dragged that man behind a truck until his head decapitated.
Yep.
So I don't think any of this is new. I do believe they were all hanged. I don't believe in a lot of the stuff that they consider suicide. I remember, was it a year ago or so, where a woman in the military was beaten up and had bruises on her and this whole thing, and she had 2 gunshots to the head, and then they said that that was also a suicide. So I tend not to believe any of it.
Yeah.
I think in this social where we are right now, what I would like to have happen is for, in a sense, the statistics to come out of normally, like I hate to say normally, but without what's going on right now, Black people who commit suicide by being hanged, okay, or in that place, because historically it has such a visceral space that it's like we will take our lives other ways, but it's very difficult for me to wrap my brain around someone and that many people in this short of time that has taken that stance. And I don't see, like, you'd have to show me other history.
There actually has been somebody who hung, she's a writer. She was a writer on This Is Us, who hung herself, about a week and a half ago or something like that.
Yes, I remember that. I do remember that.
And I remember, like, you thinking, wait, what? Like, out of all the ways to go, that is not one of the ways that I would think somebody would,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
happened that way, you know. So
I had a cousin. He was in middle school, and he died by hanging himself. So,
Okay.
oh, and I would just like to say, for the young woman who died, I've met her several times. She was a really talented writer, really smart, strong, insightful. I just have nothing but good things to say about my interaction with her. The very few times I've had with her, but I've seen her from a distance. I know people knew her, and I don't know. I guess they always say check on your strong friends. So
yeah. So just to recap, just to let everybody know what we're talking about. There's a young lady. Her Instagram was Fly Jazz or Jazz Fly. I think Fly Jazz.
It's Jazz Fly.
Jazz Fly. But she was a writer.
And then her name is Jasmine Waters.
Yes, Jasmine Waters, who was going through some mental challenges during the pandemic, and she kept posting it on, her social media that, hey, it's really challenging, but I'm going to cook my way through this, and then she ended up taking her life. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode about mental health, so that we can make sure that we're checking on our friends and taking care of ourselves. Anybody else want to jump in on that?
Well, going back to mental health, I have no idea if it's suicide or if it's new, not even modern day lynching. Modern day lynching is all the other killing we've been seeing. This is actual lynching again. I don't know how I process that if that is proven to be the case. Like that is too much for my heart to handle. So I think Cory and Kimberly, your work is important. And it's like sometimes I feel like I'm an empath, right? Like I take on the hurt of others. And I think that's why I struggle so much in my own spaces, because I do take on that. So to even conceive that this is the terror that we're going back to as Black people just is too much. It puts me back in that space.
Yeah. No, it's I'm the same way like you, which is why I had to turn off the TV. Because I was taking on too much. Yeah. Cory, did you have something that you wanted to say about it?
Yeah. I don't watch the news. I call it the noose. And in journalism, there's a rule: if it bleeds, it leads. And so as much as I want to believe that it's out of the good hearts of the people to shine a light on what's going on, it also pays bills. You understand that this is a part, there's a fascination around this right now. And so there's a certain intention, but there will be a time where it's like, what's the next bright, shiny thing that we're going to fix on? And something else that I really advocate people to watch is there's an activist by the name of Kimberly Jones. She has a video. There's a video of her talking about why people loot and what leads to distinguishing between protesters, rioters, and looters. And what is so salient about what she talks about, and this gets back to the depression we were kind of talking about, Janora and Abdul, this sort of existential dread that we as African Americans often deal with, is, she says in so many instances, it's like, this is not a level playing field economically. So you see moments like Rosewood historically, or Tulsa, Black Wall Street, where these thriving Black communities are burnt down to the ground. Where's the trust there? Where's the we're as Black people, we're getting an even opportunity, an equal opportunity, and it really shook me. And I suggest everyone check out that video, because she, in just a short amount of time, nails the existential dread that many African Americans feel like they don't have a shot,
and with such passion.
Yeah. So what do you guys think about the Dave Chappelle special that he did? That was called 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
I thought it was powerful. I mean, we never know what we're going to get when it comes to Dave Chappelle. But he actually talked about it. He said, you're going to get the truth. If you're going to tune into me, I'm just going to say it like it is. And so I think that different people listen and understand differently, as in, I might share something with somebody, but the way that I speak doesn't resonate. But you get somebody like Dave Chappelle, they're like, oh, I get it. So I think the more people that can share the injustice in whatever way, we're continuing to move it forward in terms of just understanding that's a starting point for change.
Anybody else?
There was a section in there there was a section in there that he was talking about the warfare that Chris Dorner did, the police officer who got fired from the police job for black, and he talked about the warfare he did on them and put out a manifesto. I guess my question to Cory and Kimberly: what are your thoughts? Do you believe in such a thing as like psychological warfare that's happening? Because the guy Dorner in his manifesto spoke on that, and I think Chappelle tiptoed around it. But what do you guys think about that in terms of the psychological warfare that might affect you spiritually and mentally?
Cory, do you want me to go first? Because I can address something real quick, and I think you can piggyback. Like I was telling you before, with your DNA and what happens, how things are expressed, and certain things are triggered or not. You can actually have, with epigenetics, things that are carried from, let's say, slavery, seeing someone murdered, that can be passed on to your offspring, to be perfectly honest with you. And how those things, the psychological warfare that happens when, I think we were discussing before about the police officer. Please, Chrystee, give me her name again, because I don't remember. That
the one that we were going to look at, Carol.
So,
Carol Horn.
Yes. So when someone didn't listen to what she was saying, or what happened as far as taking someone off, and she lost her job and her pension because she was an officer who took a chokehold off of someone. That for her, she loses her job, she loses her pension. That psychological space that she's lived in for all of these years from that moment now resonates in her body. And it can sometimes come out as illness. It can come out as mental illness or physical illness. I mean, cancer is literally a manifestation of usually an emotional illness that comes out physically in the body. So Cory, I'd like for you to take it, but I do believe that space of psychological things coming through is definitely something within the African-American Black community that we experience.
Mm-hmm. And there's also, let's talk about the current survival mechanisms. And because I don't watch the news, I'm saying this secondhand, but we all know about Amy Cooper in Central Park and the gentleman who was bird watching, I believe his name is Christian Cooper.
Correct.
And so they were asking him, he wears glasses. And he said in so many words, I don't wear these glasses because I have to. He wears the glasses because it makes white people feel safer.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about trauma, there are things ancestrally connected, but there are also current day survival mechanisms that we continue to do that perpetuate the separation, the inequities that are going on.
It's interesting that you're bringing that up, because with the whole audition process that, what I was talking about early and what I went through, I got to a place where, I would make an excuse and not going into the audition. Oh, I can't, can you tell I'll self-tape, you know what I mean? Or whatever the case may be, because there was so much going on that I would make myself sick about going in. So I do believe that stuff really does happen. And, eventually I got through it, but it still kind of creeps up every blue moon. So I know exactly what you're saying, because it happens to me. And what I loved, you guys didn't see the show last week, but Abdul talked about how, the Christian Cooper, his voice was a lot more calm or whatever. But if somebody like Abdul spoke up, he would seem a little more like aggressive, and there would be a completely different reaction, so this is all good stuff. Did you want to say anything, Abdul, before?
We always talk about, just to piggyback on what you're saying, we always talk about code switching and how even when we go in mixed company, I know a lot of us work around white people, went to school with white people, even the inflections in your voice and the things that you say switch up, because coming from somebody like myself or Cory, if we put a little bass on it, we think we're threats all the way. And I've had to have conversations when I was younger with my dad, my dad's 6'4", dark-skinned Black man, really deep voice, and now he had to navigate through society. So it's a mind fuck.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because that's just how we grow up, right? Like, I'm not thinking about code switching as trauma. It's just what you learn to do as Black folks here growing up. But now that we finally have an opportunity to process it in another way, it's like, wait, that is trauma. That is something that I'm doing to change, fully being me, to fit into the society. So it's nice now to have a space to process those things too that might have not seemed wrong, but are part of our existence to survive.
And just to wrap everything up of what we're saying, I think what all of this has brought up for a lot of us is that all of those things that we had to do to survive being Black is now starting to affect our body, because now it's like you were asleep, your body was asleep the whole entire time, and now all of a sudden all this stuff is waking up in your body, and now I'm starting to find myself like, oh, I think I better go work out. I need to walk, because the anxiety and the being upset is all starting to flare up. So it's interesting times, and that's why I wanted to do this episode. I'm so glad you guys had a chance to come on. We do something that's called our BPS Person of the Week. And what I like to do is showcase people who would normally not be showcased in whatever shape or form. So I had a young man that reached out to me whose name is Roger James, who is an artist. So I wanted to show some of his work that he has, and I'm going to actually bring him on so that he can talk about it. It looks like you, so I think it's just your audio, right, James?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So go ahead and just tell us a little bit about your work. And
well, first of all, I'm Roger James. I'm in the DMV area, Washington, D.C., Prince George County area. And most of my work is oil-based. And I love doing figures of African Americans, whether it be athletes, historical figures, actors, etc., and also do children's books.
Nice. So Roger reached out to me, Roger James reached out to me on Instagram and said, hey, I would love to send you some of my stuff. And I was like, oh, sure. And next thing you know, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like amazing. Like his stuff was amazing. I wanted to make sure that we showcased him, Roger, just because I think your stuff is phenomenal. People should know about you. If anybody is interested in his work, it's right there on the bottom, which is James Studio with 2 eyes, studio.com. So if you get a chance and you want to support another artist, an African-American artist, please make sure that you go to his website. And I just want to make sure that you get exposed and that people know your name. So, and what's your IG so that people can reach out to you on IG?
RJAM 1974, and I do personal requests.
Got it. Okay, sounds good. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining and coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, thanks, Roger. Yes, were you going to say something?
I do want to say something. You had a comment where they said epigenetics can leave the body, and I absolutely fundamentally agree, James, with you on that. We are not victims. I just wanted to express that's where it's housed, but through the things that we can do within our own self-talk, within our connection to spirituality, the words that we speak over ourselves, the food that we put in our bodies that turns our DNA on and off, all of those things, I am a fundamental believer in that. And no, we are not victims at all.
So just to wrap up everything, again, we want to thank Cory Tyler, Kimberly Joy Morgan. Thank you for joining our session today. Is there anything that you guys would like to, because I think we're a little bit over our time, but is there anything you would like to promote while you're here on the show to let people know where to find you, anything that they can support you on?
Yeah, absolutely. So go to my website, CoryTyler.com. Join the Compassion Club. It starts later this June. I'd love to have you. And meditation is huge right now. You got the Calm app. You've got Insight Timer. I encourage you all to find a way to just be with yourself. Even if you set your timer on your phone for 5 minutes of just being still and silent, getting connected with yourself makes a world of difference for me.
All right. Kimberly?
Yeah, so I would love for you to join me on doallthingswithjoy.com as well. Connection, mostly everything for me is Do All Things with Joy. So you can find that on IG and Facebook and YouTube, everything that's there. And join me for Share the Joy, which is what I do as my wonderful cast that I broadcast out every week. And then the book, Share the Joy, 52 Weeks to Abundant Health. If you really want to change and work through those things 1 week at a time, that would be an excellent start. And you can find that on Amazon Prime.
Great. Janora?
Yes, I just wanted to plug both Kimberly and Cory. I love them both. I actually was a client of Kimberly, so she is the truth. And I appreciate you, and I love you. And Cory, you were my first friend when I moved to Alabama 20 years ago. So I love you. I love your evolution to get some compassion and check out all the things that you are doing. I wanted to take my time to give a shout out to those who continue to listen and chime in and support. So Tim, James, you've come in always. Natasha showing love, and a special shout out to meeting Monica. You've been a couple weeks in a row. Love you, sis. Shout out to Leslie and Kendra, who are joining from North Carolina in support of Kimberly. So it's all the community here, and it counts and it matters and is appreciated.
Beautiful. Abdul? Anything?
I have nothing to promote, but I believe, thank you, Cory and Kimberly. You guys were both amazing. Could you please both just state again for the record where people can contact you and all that other stuff? And thank you again. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, and I got them. I got them too at the bottom here that people can see. So go ahead. Yeah, and there.
I'm Kimberly. I'm doallthingswithjoy.com. That's doallthingswithjoy.com. And I just want to thank you all for having me on the show. I've really enjoyed being here today. Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah, same here. I learned a lot. CoryTyler.com. That's where you can find me. And I really enjoyed this. This made my day. Thank you all.
Oh, great. Yes. So let me just wrap up everything. Again, everybody, we thank you so much for joining. I am going to do a teen people stuff on the 30th, which I will be advertising soon so you guys can see. Please come out and support for all of the teens and how they are affected by what is happening in the world today. So that is going to be on the 30th of June. And again, please make sure you guys are taking care of your health. Health is wealth. It's really important during these times, no matter if you're white or black, make sure that you are taking care of your health and seek out help if you need it. There's nothing wrong with seeking out help. Again, we want to thank also our BPS of the week, Roger James. Thank you so much for your work and your talent. Continue to keep doing what you do and being a blessing to others. And we are going to sign out. So thanks again, everybody. I really appreciate it. Goodbye, everybody.
Peace out.
Have a good one.
All right.